Hello and welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see so many people here right at the start of the event. So, thank you to those who have been waiting to be let into the Zoom. We're just going to give it a few minutes before I do any proper introductions to the session today. So, feel free to say hello in the chat in the meantime. Let us know where you're joining from, either geographically or what organization you belong to, whatever feels right to you. It'd be lovely to hear from you in the chat. We'll just give people a moment to get into the Zoom. Fantastic. Welcome to those who've just joined us. We're just giving it a couple of minutes. It's great seeing some names pop up in the chat. Someone joining from Brighton, that's my neck of the woods. Welcome, everyone. Got Barcelona, North Carolina. Amazing. Welcome to the event. I'll just give it one more minute before I introduce, because there's still lots of people joining. Thank you for being patient. We are an international community this evening, which is nice. Okay. All right, I think I'll make a start. I can continue letting people into the event as we go. My name is Jess Robson. I work for the RSA. The RSA has lots of different thematic networks, and the fashion network is kindly led by our fellow Azimma, who is a senior lecturer in fashion design. Now, Azimma has already led on some really brilliant events, and I'm really excited to hear from both her and the speakers that we have this evening. I'll let Azima introduce our speakers, but yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Good evening and welcome, and to some of you, welcome back to the Cutting Edge Lecture Series. Today's topic is reimagining fashion, systems, values, and radical futures. Our guest speakers this evening, Beatrace Oola, Mitchell Vassie, and Professor Dilys Williams, will share their perspectives with us. So we'll have about 10-15 minutes for questions and answers at the end of all three presentations. But in the interim, please feel free to add your questions to the chat. Okay, so our first speaker, Beatrace Oola, founder and CEO of award-winning innovator of Fashion Africa Now, is the first presenter. So over to you, Beatrice.
Thank you very much. Also, a warm welcome from my side. I just want to share my presentation. I hope you will be able to see it in can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
But something is okay. So I'm Beatrice.
You might want to do full screen now.
Pardon, is it full screen or?
It's not, no.
Oh, okay. Because I can't. How do I change it? Sorry. Well, do you see the second slide?
Yeah, we can see the second one. First slide now. Okay, I mean, you can just start.
It's clear enough. We're really clear on it. It's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, as long as you can see it. Great. So I'm Beatrice. I'm founder of Fashion Africa Now, a digital space and an international network. I'm speaking from an Afro-diasporic, decolonial, Pan-African perspective. And I'm a creative consultant, an interdisciplinary curator, an African fashion advocate. And therefore, I would like to start also with an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go together, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think this is something what is really hitting our topic somehow from my perspective. And I have been questioning who cares about clean clothes? Since I've been asking myself, okay, who defines what clean means? Who is centered when we talk about sustainability? How can we also allow different perspectives to be part of this narrative? Since African cultures have long practiced what is known as slow fashion and what is deeply rooted in culture, in knowledge, and in respect for nature. So in this series, I would like to, ask clean for whom, at whose expenses, and who gets left behind. If we look at secondhand market, Kantamanto, for example, or Owino market in Uganda, the colonial legacy, since local industries are dying, profits flow to the north, pollution stays in the south. So let's talk about waste colonism, a term that was coined in 1989, describes the global north practice of dumping its fashion waste to the global south, particularly African countries. So the term emphasizes colonial power structures, a continuation of extractive relationships rooted in colonism. What's the problem here? Economic dependency. Countries in the global south are often reliant on export of raw materials, while simultaneously dependent on imports from the global north as well. So the economic benefits of the global north and the codepending of the global south. So that is also called neocolonism. And we need to look at these levels when we also look at this fashion system, unpacking it from a political, economic, social perspective. So the economic benefits remain in the global north. Brands profits, exports profit, while Africa bears the environmental burden and also the social consequences. So how does it work? International corporations, trade agreements, or World Bank loans create structures that keep countries in permanent dependency. Or if we also look at political influence, development aid. These are structures, how this is still continuing. This is not only an environmental issue. It's about agency, it's about dignity, it's about economic justice. Because if we want to rethink sustainability, we must confront imbalance and recognize the repairing of the future, recognizing what happened in the past historically, so means acknowledging the past and acting to disrupt its continuity. We have also another layer, of course, when we look at sustainability dominantly through an Eurocentric lens that highlights Western values, beauty ideals, consumer behaviors, while local cultures and marginalized cultures always are referred or reduced to folklore. So if we, sorry, I'm just, so that means sustainability, from my perspective, without justice is just a trend. Maybe if we just rethink sustainability without justice is just a trend. Because I want us really to take this in for a moment and really have this in front of our eyes. Sustainability without justice is just a trend. So if I look at African fashion designers who are transforming the fashion industry, who are coming up with weaving techniques which have been rooted since years, transforming the industry and allowing again African knowledge system to be valued, to be seen. So true sustainability should not be guilt-driven, but grounded in justice and in equity and in community agency. So we need a justice-oriented framework that honors culture, restores economic equity, and empowers local industries and the people. So it's always also about the people. And another question I ask myself is, whose story are we wearing? What do we understand when we hear whose story we are wearing? If we think of, okay, what is actually defining African fashion? Because designers are returning traditional fabrics, aesthetics in new modern styles. Textile waste is turned into new materials. And this is something like here, for example, the brand Emeka Suit, a German-based brand who works with artisans in Ghana and Kenya, who's using upcycling as a technique, designing with old curtains. And Kwa, for example, who invented Dakala cloth, used denim leftovers turned into a new textile. Jose Hendo, who's using backcloth and Ugandan textile that is actually among one of the oldest textiles in the world. And I wonder why these perspectives sometimes are not centered enough and not always allowed to be part of a conversation. And we need to ask, whose stories does fashion tell? Who is invisible? Who gets romanticized and who gets erased? Because African fashion is not just an aesthetic, it's a language of survival, resistance, creativity, believing in heritage of culture through art. It reimagines systems, it centers African knowledge production. These are masterpieces. And in my understanding, we should look at cultural resistance. We should look at values like patience, respect for material, nature, pride, and craftsmanship. And in supporting local craft, sustainable fashion must move away from superficial greenwashing or embrace long-term structural change. And therefore, I would like to close also with an African philosophy. I am because you are. Maybe we can all take it in. I am because you are. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. That was fantastic. Mitchell, you're next, and I'm sure you can go to bed thereafter. Thank you for joining us at such an early time from in Vietnam. I think it's 1 o'clock or 1:30.
It's 1:15, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So it's fine. I mean, it's okay.
Thank you. Good. So over to you. I don't know if you want to share a presentation or if you're just going to.
I would love to. And yeah, I will. I will share my screen. Hi everyone. Thank you, Beatrice. That was really beautiful. So I will share my screen if this works. Let's see. Sorry, here's my messy desktop, everyone. You're welcome. Let me see. Okay, view. Full screen. Okay, so can everyone see this okay? Perfect. So today I'm going to talk to you about a co-creative project titled Artisan Agency and the Pluriverse, a decolonial approach to denim design. It was part of my it's a continuation from my master's in sustainable fashion at Falmouth University, and it's kind of a continuation of that co-creative journey, supporting my teaching practice as an associate lecturer now at RMIT University. So in particular, I'm going to talk to you about a collaboration with two amazing, remarkable women, Miss Santi Ting and her mother, Miss Santi Bick, artisans and founders of the Hoa Tien Brocade Cooperative in Nha Am province in northern Vietnam. Through partnership, we explored the cultivation of cotton, natural indigo dyeing, traditional weaving techniques, culminating in the creation of a denim twill fabric, which we later crafted into a five-pocket denim jean. It's a bridge between contemporary Western utility wear and red tie craftsmanship, whilst asking questions about reimagining fashion systems, values, and radical futures. So the red tie have long practiced agriculture and bioregional textile production, growing cotton, cultivating silk, fermenting indigo, and weaving materials sourced from their environment, or of course their local environment. And these are slow, embodied, and place-based ways of making. For the Thai, weaving is not just craft, it's memory, identity, and spirituality. So brocade textiles are deeply symbolic, each motif spun, dyed, and woven by hand, telling stories of ancestors' protection, prosperity, and again, a connection to the land. So one of the most powerful realizations I had during this collaboration was how motifs and materials themselves function or can function as pedagogy. So in the taizo, or the red tie brocade, motifs are not only decorative, they are slow literacies. They mark rites of passage, agricultural timing, mourning periods, and relational roles within the community. So knowledge is passed down not through books, but through rhythm and gesture and the materials that they produce. So in this way, the loom becomes a site of learning. The naturally dyed yarn and the brocade becomes like a living archive. These practices are world building of ecological memory, culture, and also continuity. So our work began with the planting of cotton and fermentation of indigo. Indigo in this context is not just a pigment, it's a medicine, it's protection. And the indigo vat is seen not as a tool, but as very much a living spirit, and it's bound by many sacred protocols. So I was fortunate enough to be present during an early morning dye session when a prayer was offered to the indigo vat. Miss Ting recited the prayer, "Please, indigo spirit, don't be weak or ill. If I've made any mistakes, please forgive me. I pray for the god of indigo to always be good, so I can dye the fabric as black as crow's wings and ebony wood." So it was a really amazing experience to witness that. It was a beautiful moment, and a privilege, of course. So this collaboration also prompted a deep reflection of my own journey as a participant in fashion systems, as a designer, as a teacher, a lecturer, and now more a researcher. So much of my career was spent in denim, a material I love deeply, but one of the most environmentally damaging in terms of water consumption, chemical pollution, and in particular, often labor conditions, particularly in the global south. Given my long-standing obsession with denim and my love of craft, focusing on this for my final project felt both obvious and also necessary. So in both my personal practice and this project, I've come to appreciate the quiet teachings of imperfection. There's a Vietnamese saying, which one of my students shared with me, and if there are any Vietnamese listeners, I'm sorry for my terrible pronunciation, but it is "Tap ba la mei teng hong," which basically means failure is the mother of success. And I found that to be true not only in my life, in my daily life, but also in co-creation. Also, the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi echoes this, an aesthetic that embraces the imperfect and the impermanent and the incomplete. It reminds us that flaws are not faults, but traces of time, and also a quiet rebellion against the polished ideal. It restores the right to make mistakes and finds grace in the crack, the dent, and a threadbare edge. So I've realized my enduring love of denim and indigo is rooted in the sensibility. So denim holds a memory, each fade and fray a map of movement, labor, and care. So it grows with you, showing the scars of living, a humble artifact of identity and time. So this philosophy of longevity, memory, and imperfection became the quiet foundation for this project. In the Taizo community, material is not something distant or industrial, it's something alive. Cotton is planted, tended, and spun by hand. Indigo leaves are grown, fermented, and carefully coaxed into the indigo vats, into the living vats. And every step is slow, relational, and full of care. Akira Minagawa of the brand Mina Pahonen once said, "The value of anything handmade resides in the belief that creative energy and loving attention of the maker can be transmitted through an object to another person, like a secret whispered in the ear." Working alongside Miss Bick and Miss Ting, this idea became real for me, not just a romantic sentiment or a philosophical idea. I could feel how their materials are imbued with their knowledge and their history, and also their spirit. Here, cloth is not only something to wear, it's something to listen to, a semiotic carrier of memory, affection, and very much story. So here I had the opportunity to plant seeds with Miss Bick, and then on my return to her village a few months later to harvest the seeds. And what followed was hours of processing, drying, cleaning, fluffing, I think that's a technical term, fluffing, and eventually spinning by hand into thread. It was a powerful reminder of how far removed we are in most of fashion from the origins of material, the labor, the care, and the time embedded in the cloth that we wear. Oops, sorry. So, sorry. Oh, this is Miss Ting. This is one of the first trial vats that we started in Hanoi. And then with the warp yarn, indigo rope dyed, and the stitch yarn dyed with fermented yam root, I wanted to share a basic denim weave with them. So here's the indigo yarn. Okay, so the basic denim twill. So I brought with me a simple cardboard loom, nothing fancy, just enough to demonstrate a basic 3x1 twill structure. There was something really beautifully reciprocal in that moment. I was basically teaching a new technique to a master weaver. But more than that, we're exchanging approaches, perspectives, and ways of thinking. So the next day, Miss Ting took what we worked on and returned to her village. And that evening, she sat with her niece and other young girls in the village and basically taught them on a cardboard loom the basic twill weave, which I thought was amazing. And it was kind of humbling to see how quickly knowledge can travel, not just across language or culture, but actually through hands and again through trust, a word that I'm using a lot in this presentation. And there's a reason for that. So that exchange was small but deeply moving. It reminded me that co-design isn't always about innovation. Sometimes it's about translation of tools, of methods, and also curiosity. I then returned to the village and to start the trials in the fabric. Miss Ting and Miss Bick put together a loom so fast it was dizzying, the speed. It was fast and focused, and it was really incredible to watch. And clearly it was their decades of experience. It was really obvious, not on show. What followed were some long days and nights of trial and error, adjusting tension and trying different yarns, switching directions and exploring possibilities. I love this picture of Miss Ting, Miss Bick. And here's like the start of our one of our first trials that we made, and more. So the very first trials. So a few weeks later, after I returned from Hanoi to Hanoi, I returned to the village, and to my surprise, Miss Bick had continued weaving in my absence, but the structure had changed. She adapted the 3x1 twill. It no longer conformed to what I had introduced. Instead, it reflected her own sensibility, her understanding of the yarn, and her years of experience. So while it departed from the original blueprint, I love the outcome, and it carried with it the imprint of our process, dialogue and negotiation and trust. This shift, unexpected as it was, offered something richer, a material that embodied our co-authorship. After thinking about what happened, I came to the conclusion that this wasn't really a deviation. It was almost like a declaration, a quiet act of sovereignty. It reminded me that shared authorship is not about fidelity to a plan, it's about trusting each other and about knowing the work can evolve in your absence, and that's absolutely okay. Miss Mick said to me, let me go, yes, it's not what we planned, but it's still strong and beautiful, and I made it my way, which I thought was genius. I love that. In the heart of Hanoi, I met another craftsman, Mr. Hien, an eyewear craftsman, and he basically helped us develop some buttons using water buffalo horn from buffaloes that had reached the end of their lives working the land. And I think the outcome was so warm and beautiful. We were all very happy with the outcome of this. And next, not long to go, everyone. As the denim tour took shape, we focused on one but important but powerful detail, quiet but powerful detail, actually, the embroidery on the back pocket. It was the bok kwai motif. We chose this together. It's a symbol of protection used in Thai tradition to ward off bad spirits and welcome good fortune. Placing it on the back pocket of a jean, a garment made to move, felt deeply symbolic. More than decoration, it became a gesture of care or a portable blessing stitched into the cloth. And Miss Ting's niece, her name is Uyen, this is her first time trying embroidery, so I was really chuffed that she helped us with this project as well. So one particularly powerful moment in this project, which I was really excited about, came when Miss Ting and I presented our work at the Denim and Jeans trade show in Saigon, in Ho Chi Minh City, in a space typically reserved for business and industrial voices and commercial innovation. Miss Tin stood and shared her weaving knowledge and her experience with a room of industry denim experts. It was a quiet yet kind of radical reversal, an artisan being spoken, rather than an artisan being spoken about, but speaking for herself. Which I thought was really a very cool moment. Not demonstrating tradition as nostalgia, but as living, adaptive kind of expertise. And her presentation was really well received in that environment, surprisingly, actually, because it was very much business. So the final denim garment was made in collaboration with another Mr. Hien from Tong Thrift in Saigon. He approached the project with care and craftsmanship, but also with a certain pragmatism. When it became clear that there wasn't enough hand-woven fabric to complete the jean, he simply decided to continue with another material. No communication, no fuss, no drama, just a solution, as you can see here. As a designer, I had mixed feelings. It wasn't what I envisioned, but as a researcher, I saw that moment for what it was. It was a learning point, a reminder that co-creation doesn't always go to plan, and that control is often an illusion. So in this moment, I was reminded that co-creation is not always neat or controlled. It's full of friction and assumptions, and moments where things go unsaid, and these silences matter. They reveal where power sits, even in well-intentioned partnerships. This outcome raised questions. Who has the final call? What happens when expectations and realities diverge? These are not failures. My initial thought was this is an absolute disaster as a designer. However, I had time to think about it, and it's not a failure. There are moments that push us to reflect more deeply on authorship, trust, and the messy, beautiful nature of collaboration. So in the end, the garment is still full of story, not in spite of the compromises, but because of them. And a reminder that in research, as in life, we learn as much from what goes wrong as what goes right. Again, Taba Lame Teng Hong, indeed. So in conclusion, as this part of the project drew to a close, it didn't really feel like an ending. What stays with me the most is not just the garment, the fabric, or the outcomes, but the relationships. Miss Ting and Miss Bick have reminded me that craft is not just a skill, it's a story, it's memory and spirit. And collaboration is not always about harmony, it's about learning to stay with the tension and grow within it. And this project sought to explore alternative fashion futures, where bioregional textiles, craft agency, slow practices, and reciprocity take center stage, not extraction and erasure. So if anyone would like to take a look, here are the details for the Hwatia Brocade, her website and Insta, and that's me. And then finally, yes, acknowledgements. There were some, I worked with some really amazing artisans. And so thanks to them. And thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Our final guest this evening is Professor Dilys Williams, founder and director of the Centre of Sustainable Fashion, University Arts London Research Centre. So, Dilys, over to you.
Good evening and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Esma, and also Beatrice and Mitchell. So yeah, great pleasure to be sharing a platform with you today. And yeah, some really interesting things. I'm just thinking about the things you've said already. Yeah, Beatrice, when you're talking about patience, imagine a patient fashion system. That would be very different from most of what fashion is at the moment. And Mitchell, when you're talking about a system of embodied knowledges. Yeah, anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about my work. Yeah, as Esma said, I'm the founder and director of Centre for Sustainable Fashion. We are a community of interdisciplinary tacit knowledges, cultural, geographical differences, situated knowledges that we come together in a place of exploring, learning, and making sense of things, because that's what designers do. We've been doing that for a long time now. Also, some of our community have joined us more recently. But really, what brings us together and what kind of it's the elastic that we pull on is around an intention of our work being an exploration of living well together in a more than human world, which sounds grand. But fashion is something that is personal, it's societal, and it's ecological in nature. And we know that the societal, cultural, and economic laws and logics of it are man-made, and they're out of sync with the ecological laws. And if we're going to live well, we do well to live within the ecological laws. And that means we need to learn a lot from each other. We need an expanded set of knowledges to think about what it means to be designing. And practices of imagination are very much part of that. So I was delighted. Thank you, Esma, for inviting me. And Esma knows, actually, she came along last year. We had a festival, 3 days of imagining possibilities. And that was really to kind of talk about the fact that designers are known as problem solvers. We are expected to be able to fix things. And actually, right now, not only is being able to think differently way more than fixing a problem, it's actually thinking differently about the world and who and how we are in the world. So we see, and we wanted to be able to celebrate imagining possibilities as the kind of premise of what designing is about. And we had an evening actually within that that Esma came to that was about radical imagining from our ecological roots. And we had Bayo Kamalafe, a philosopher, we had Colectivo Malvestidas there and others, and our community, including dancers, speakers, and this idea of how we imagine otherwise. And the practices of imagining otherwise are very necessary. One of our good friends, Emeritus Professor John Wood, reminds us that we're not running out of resources, we're running out of imagination. We can't actually think beyond the constructs of neoliberal capitalism that engulfs so many of our ways of thinking and doing and knowing in the world. And those that don't have those ways of thinking, knowing and doing are subsumed by the power imbalances of it. So how do we think differently? Thinking about a change in era is a massive thing. And we know also, going back to what Beatrice said about patience, that we can only contribute to something, we can't change it. So what can our contribution be, and what can that look like? Well, one of the things that we use so that we can live in this complexities and the uncomfortableness, and I'm very much part of that uncomfortableness in a university, a Western university that is very restricted to who can take part in the practices of that university. It should be a safe space of learning and knowing, and yet there's a lot of restrictions. I myself, as a white woman educated in the UK, are very aware of the limitations of my own knowledge and the limitations of the knowledges that I can have access to because I have very limited linguistic abilities beyond a couple of European languages. So how do we think about ourselves? We draw on different philosophies and practices. In fact, Beatrice actually also referenced Ubuntu, this idea of interdependencies of I am because you are, or because we are. We also draw on different philosophies from belief systems, like Thich Nhat Hanh talks about interbeing. Even scientists such as Rockström, whose team looked at and identified planetary boundaries, looks at the fact that without interspecies, intergenerational and intragenerational justice, we cannot live well within planetary boundaries. So these are some of the premises of imagining otherwise, and some of the premise of our work. But it involves a plurality that is not always neat and comfortable. Mitchell was just talking about co-design, and even thinking through participatory practices and drawing on ideas of how co-inquiry can take place. It can all be instrumentalized, it can be commodified. And indeed, there's a lot of talk already about decolonizing the curriculum, but what we may find is that actually it's a colonial approach to decolonization, which is not decolonizing anything at all. So we have to also be very attentive and careful to actually what is changing and where the power lies. So I could talk for a while about this, as Emma also knows. So I'm going to be trying to be neat. I've got a little parcel of time here. I wanted to talk about two things. One, about fashion otherwise, which is something that I've been writing and talking about for a few years now. And also through that time was delighted to discover that others are talking about ideas of otherwise in far more profound ways than myself. I came across the work of Lola Olufemi more recently, and others, and so I sort of humbly am now reflecting on some of their ways of thinking about otherwise as practices of care, practices of dispersion of knowledge, practices of reparation, and what that actually means. And it's not only about futures. These are practices of otherwise exist and always have done, and yet they are not necessarily recognized and are drowned out by louder voices. So it does also involve futuring and future modeling. Some of our practices and some of our methodologies are around world making, and how do you design and think about a shift in consciousness and a shift in worldview, as well as a shift in what and how we design. But it starts with the past, the present, and it also considers the future. It's not just a conceptual framework, though. It's about pragmatic thinking about what it means to be a designer. And one of the ways in which I've thought about this for a while is taking this idea of expanding the role of being a designer. So yes, we are designers of boundary objects quite often when we're working within a fashion business, and we have a particular set of collections to develop, and so we might feel as if we are stuck within that. But there's a lot that can be done. We work with amazing businesses. We work in design rooms and in buying offices with our teams. So we have teams that are what we call knowledge exchangers, or co-learning inside industry. We have an education team where we're developing and changing the premise of who, why, and how we educate, think, and what we learn. And we have a team as well of interdisciplinary designers within the centre and with those that we work with in projects. And how we co-learn across those three areas is also a practice of otherwise, which is actually not necessarily always recognised within university systems. So this idea of boundary objects, we've worked with designers in teams that then have been able to change things based on their intentionality. So it may seem like a small thing, like ASOS committing not to use angora or feathers, etc. Kering deciding that they would ban fur across their different maisons, but these things do create change. But those changes have to happen in relation to wider changes. So the second area of being a designer is this idea of a designer as co-convener. Mitchell gave an amazing example of that in his work, so I don't need to elaborate too much more on that. But a third area of thinking about what it means to be a designer is a letting go of control, which again, Mitchell talked a little bit about. And as a designer, I know that that's not easy. But if you think of the designer as a host, as a convener of a convivial space, then you are actually creating the conditions, whether it's visually, whether it's through practices of ensuring there's agency of everybody in the room. But that is a way of being able to use our design skills so that there's a space for what might emerge that we don't ourselves know about. And it's not our knowledges that are informing it. And this idea of designer as host is something that I feel really is expansive as a designer. When I started working in this area, I was used to working in a design room, which was great. But since working in this area, I find myself in the House of Commons, I find myself in chemistry labs, I find myself in all sorts of different places. So while some people talk about sustainability as a constraint on design, I think hopefully we are demonstrating that this expansion of the role of the designer is also not only necessary and exciting, but it gives the agency of designing a stronger and greater sense of what it can be. So that's can give lots of details. We have a lot of projects on our website, so rather than going through them all, I think it's probably more useful just to say that that sort of premise, it's not a fixed framing, but it's been useful for us in thinking about an expansion of the role of what it means to be a designer. And the second thing that I wanted to share with you is some sort of extracts actually from a paper that I wrote in 2022, which was about designing otherwise, and the sort of some of the premise of that. And I'm also using that because I know I need to be careful about keeping to time. And just to draw from that, it starts by talking about the fact that it's really difficult to understand ourselves when everything is moving all the time. We are hurtling through the 2020s with the Earth spinning on its axis at around 450 meters a second. And we live in super complexity. It's called the VUCA times: vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And as humans, it's quite difficult to grapple with all of these uncertainties and to think about an unknowable world. We think that we want certainties. And apparently we prefer a certainty that is negative than an uncertainty. I haven't got the reference for that, but somebody told me that quite recently. But we've got to learn to be able to understand what it means to live in an ambiguous world. So how we perceive ourselves and each other and how we see our interdependencies is absolutely at the heart of that. And designers, Brian Eno spoke recently at the World Design Congress and reminded us that scientists really explore what is and help us to understand what is, whereas artists and designers imagine the what if and try it out and test it and see what it looks like. So I feel that designers are well placed to be taking part in this world and to be able to make sense of it if we have an ecological intention and if we really understand what it means to have an ecological identity. And that means different kinds of practice and knowledge, working with different people so that our curriculum is radically changed. So thinking about that and what it looks like, I think we also need to talk about barriers. Beatrice again talked at the beginning about very, very clear and profound barriers, and I think it's important when we're talking about practices of imagination that we are not seen as being dreamers, although actually there is a real need for dreaming. Imagination is not neutral. It depends on what your logics of the world are and what your perceptions of what success is. And so a real barrier to being able to think ecologically is the fact that the pervasive Enlightenment, industrial, technocentric thinking and the colonialization of thought is a massive, massive hindrance to us all. So I'm not talking about something here that is neat and easy. I'm talking about something that's going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of us, because it is about a redistribution of power, a redistribution of knowledges, and how we go about that. We've heard two examples of, and in fact, I also saw that Avril's on the call from the Sierra Leonean Fashion and Textiles Association, and I'm also proud to say that we've been working with people, including Omiyemi Akareli, who leads Lagos Fashion Week and has just been nominated for the Earthshot Prize. So there are lots of happenings and lots of people doing amazing things. So I think what we need to do is to, when I say we, as a group of us within a UK university, is to learn with, from, and as ecological beings that learn well with others. And practices of patience, practices of attentiveness and listening are really critical to that. And looking after each other, practices of care involve us being able to really be able to see how people interact with fashion. And fashion is such an amazing location for us to do this work, because it is tangible, it is worn on the body, it is about our identities and our belongings. So I feel that whilst we live in very vulnerable times, we also live in exciting times, and it's up to us to be able to stand up for this kind of work in a way that really has critical questioning within it. And just before I finish, how am I doing for time? I've got another 1 minute. Okay. Well then I'll skip straight to the end then. So I've got lots of examples of what different people from different perspectives have said. But I think maybe just then to round up, something that I wrote up from one of our projects called Remodeling Fashion and Remodeling Design, actually, in the end. It did actually give a list, and I don't want to be reductionist with this, but due to time, I will read out the list. It starts with designers redefining the brief, actually thinking about the intention setting of what it is, what good looks like. It means collaborating between different kinds of knowledges and being uncomfortable, because those knowledges are go into areas we know nothing about and we may not necessarily agree with. It means using participatory design and co-design practices that are attentive to power imbalance. And Freire's work around pedagogy really helps us with that, as well as obviously many others. It's about building capacity, not dependency. And Beatrice talked about that a little bit as well. It's about discourse, although I'm very aware that I'm sitting here in a very transmissive way, that we're not having an interaction, but that's so that we can speak to lots of people around the world. So I will finish now, because I want to make sure that there's plenty of space for others to speak. But it does mean that we focus on felt and situated practice and not just knowledges in books and in academic papers, although everything has its value. It means that we have to think about the lasting nature of change, that this takes a long time, and we will not be the authors, we'll be the contributors and the supporters of that change. And it means establishing common ground. We're in this together, but we feel things quite differently depending on who we are and where we are. To paraphrase Sampha's lyrics in Jonathan Livingston Seagull, we all are in this together, but how we heal and how we feel is not the same. So on that, I will thank everybody again and pass back to Esma.
Thank you, Dilys. Wow. Thank you, all of you, actually. Such powerful presentations, full of insights. I just wondered if there's any questions that the audience would like to enter in the chat. Whilst you're doing that, I do have a question to ask you all. So how can we ensure that new circular and regenerative systems don't replicate existing social inequalities? Beatrice, maybe over to you, because we haven't heard from you for a while, so, and then Mitchell and Dilys can add to it too.
All right. Yeah, thank you for this question. A huge question. So, but I would say from my perspective, I believe we should allow yeah, different ways of thinking, different ways of practicing, acknowledging the past and really reflecting, because I think the challenge here is really looking at the past historically and seeing the outcome, what we are seeing in the fashion system, what we are somehow talking about, but from my understanding, it should be a little bit more. The root is also the structural racism in fashion. That is a core what I believe needs to be addressed, dismantled somehow. And it's a process, and it's definitely going to be uncomfortable. But I think if we do not really allow this discussions and this spaces to happen, we will be repeating and repeating. And therefore, I like to talk also about deconstructing fashion, like really tearing everything apart, looking at it, all the pieces, who are the contributors, who is profiting, who are the creators, who are the artists, where's the knowledge base coming from, and to allow that everything can exist equally, that not one is better, one is less. We can exist all together equally. And I think this is something what we can gain when we really allow critical thinking. That's why this platform is amazing. I mean, cutting edge lecture series, and also what Dilys is doing, creating a platform, a space where we can be, where we can talk, where we can exchange, people can listen. And it's so important to overcome, because otherwise, if we suppress these conversations and dialogues, it's also again leading to repetition. So I think this is already a first step to reflect, to allow different perspectives on the table, and to be aware that we have different perspectives, and every different perspectives has a different need, and this should be allowed equally. And this is what I can say for now.
Thank you. I don't, Mitchell, Dilys, do you want either of you want to add to?
I'd love to. I think what Beatrice was saying is in her presentation as well is so key. So with regeneration without kind of justice isn't really a regeneration. I think I've learned a lot recently on this with this project about really about other people's voices, not just about a white Western researcher working with indigenous or ethnic minority groups, but I think it starts with that. It starts with recognizing, giving visibility to people who make fashion, who make craft, fashion, fabric. I think that's really important. So there needs to be some more transparency and humility. Um, yeah, that's it.
Dilys, or should I ask another question? You want to add to?
I can just be super brief. I think it's about honesty of intention. We've got a project called Governance for Tomorrow where we're looking at the decisions made by board members. And yeah, it's, we live in a paradox, and it's not easy for anyone here letting go of existing structures. So, but at the moment, there's a lot of pretense around sustainability. And actually, if we're more honest about the fact that people are worried about shareholder returns, and that's all they're worried about. So let's be honest about that, because that's the position you're in. Somebody else is going to be worried about the fact that they can't, don't have a roof over their heads because of the floods that have just come down because of climate change to do with water being taken out of a place. Anyway, so I think that honesty is needed. I think a greater honesty is needed.
Here, I agree. Okay, I'm going to start you off in terms of answering the next question. If you could redesign one element of the fashion system overnight, what would you change first, and why, basically?
Just that little question.
Sorry, none of these are simple questions. So yes, if you could redesign one element of the fashion system overnight, what would you change first and why? And it's not a trick question.
I think that's, and this is not a get out clause. One thing isn't going to change. We need lots of things to change simultaneously. And I'm reminded of talking with the Earthshot Prize, Hannah Jones, who used to head up the Earthshot Prize, and before that she was head of sustainability at Nike, said big business, that lots of small businesses were the biggest opportunity to change big business, because actually small businesses are often very values led. They can do things, they care, and they can do things from the heart. And so I think I'm always going to champion small businesses. So if I could change one thing, then I would get all governments around the world to give small businesses a massive loan and then let them get on with their stuff.
Great, no, thank you. So, Beatrice, if you want to add to that, I can see a question. Actually, let me just see. Beatrice, Mitchell, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, what one thing would you sort of enact first in terms of change?
Beatrice?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I
oh,
would.
Go
Ah,
ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
Should I go?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. Yeah, in the system, the imbalance, the economic imbalance. If I could change something, I would also say compensation for that for the people. Basically creating a kind of tax that companies, corporates, also consumers need to cover, like creating really a compensation system, and looking also at the historical past, what kind of damage had been created. So that would be my radical shift, and definitely it would be something everyone needs to contribute to make it work.
Thank you, Mitchell. Because we've got a couple of questions, but Mitchell, if you can respond to.
Yeah, just really briefly. I think I'd like to change who gets to decide what fashion is, and that kind of starts with teaching and education. I know there are many students and educators here. I think there are too many institutions that often here as well in the global south, it's because of necessity and financial constraints. Many courses teach students to go into an industry that we know is broken, and we're teaching them skills to enter that industry basically, and continue in a way. So I would change that, but that's pretty much it. But I'd like to change who gets to learn as well. So there's two.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, got two questions here. So the first one says visibility, voices, transparency. Absolutely. Thinking in terms of mindset shifts as a leverage point, I'm wondering how can we increase the respect for craft and for people who are making our clothing? So any takers? Don't be shy.
I'm happy to say something. I spoke a minute ago about, we've got a project at the moment that because we've been looking at different levels of the system of intervention, and somebody said there about, I can't remember if it's Mitchell or Beatrice, sorry, about changing the decision making. We were working with boards in fashion companies and looking at how they make decisions and what the decisions are made based on. And we're looking at how we can have intragenerational perspectives on the board. So this idea of the people who are making decisions all coming together, that have the different parts of the value chain, future unborn, representatives of the unborn, and representatives of the more than human. And that I think is potentially an interesting space, because that's a sort of co-learning space of people respecting and listening to each other and learning from each other around decision making. We're way off being able to say we've done anything that we can share yet. It's talk about learning through mistakes. We're definitely making a lot of those, but it's a space that feels important.
Great, thank you so much. I don't know if Mitchell, Beatrice, you want to add? If not, we've got another question.
I would just add briefly that
Sure.
I believe the fact that it's important to really understand the history on what is fashion build, to understand that and to take it from there, and to really also make time to understand and get out of your comfort zone and figure out, okay, where are voices, perspectives I can learn from? And that is also a process. So I would say it's getting out of the comfort zone and really looking into the past and elevating from what you also have. Get started.
Great, thank you. Mitchell?
I think again, sharing with students or talking to students about possibilities, possibilities of what they can do to make a difference, and to also here in Vietnam to understand a cultural heritage that is all around us, and many students really embrace this. Many students really don't care. They want to just go on TikTok and buy the latest thing from South Korea. So I mean, it's difficult talking about it and to inspire. And it's not only my job to do that. It's many people's jobs to do that. So I think that's really important because there's a huge amount of craft here and globally, of course. And really, it's about the people being recognized for their heritage and the beauty of what they can produce. I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So this last question, I'm not too sure if I understand it, Laura, but I'll read it. So where should consumers stroke citizens' education be placed within the sustainable fashion system? No. So where should it be placed? There's another. Oh, Laura, you got another. Okay, you've added to it. So, sustainable fashion is a broad and complex topic, as we have discovered and are continuing to discover. And academic research generally focuses on transition of textile manufacturing practices, leaving aside the transformation of the culture of buying and throwing away. Okay, I hear you. Okay.
Maybe I can just quickly
Yes,
answer to
please.
that. Yeah, because it's true. We talk about it a lot in an academic level, but I understand that the consumers need also a place where they can receive this information. And therefore, platforms like Fashion Africa Now, for example, or different platforms who give you an opportunity to access, to get to know different brands, where you have a touch point and you can see different brands, you can get to know their stories. So you get an idea, okay, there's so much more out there. And that leads again to people who talk from different perspectives. And I think it leads to marketing, communication in a place. So companies should be responsible to give this information to their clients, to the consumers, by communicating platforms like ours within their company philosophy, within their corporate responsibility department. So I think there's still a kind of lack that the consumer somehow is not really connected to what else is out there and how can they shape the industry by being more responsible, being more aware. This is what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, as we're literally about to shut up shop, there's loads of questions, but I am gonna, I think, shut up shop really. So thank you so much, Beatrice, Mitchell, and Dilys. Three amazing presentations. I've learned so much, and it's been a joy to have you and the audience. And I'm sure you've all, found this very sort of useful and inspirational, because it is about moving forward, like collectively. And yeah, I'm just so happy. What a great evening. So thank you. I'm hoping that you can all join us for the third lecture. in February 2026, and it's titled Material Matters, Innovation for Regenerative Industry. So once again, thank you for your time. It's been fabulous. And thank you, our speakers. Thank you so much. Okay, until the next time, take care, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.